Also, you say you want to make the State Department stronger, but everything we've seen coming from y'all is that you're dead set on kind of killing it or at least undermining American interests. I think you proposed an 84% budget cut, plans for widespread diplomatic closures, laying off staff across the board. I don't see how any of those things really makes us stronger.
But when it comes to the State Department, our consular services are actually intend on ramping up efforts because of the reasons that I've just outlined below, because of the reasons I just outlined earlier. And we recognize that as a top priority. We want it to be a success. It's a priority for the president.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to America First. If you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe because we're bringing you the truth that the mainstream media won't tell you. And if you want to support our mission to put America first in everything we do, head over to patreon.com/AmericaFirst, where you can support us for as low as $5 a month. Every dollar helps us continue fighting for the values that made this country great. Today, we're diving into a congressional hearing that perfectly encapsulates everything wrong with the left's approach to foreign policy and national security. We've got Representative Dina Titus, a Democrat from Nevada, going after Secretary of State Marco Rubio with the same tired talking points and misrepresentations that we've come to expect from the Democrat Party. But what's beautiful about this exchange is watching Rubio systematically dismantle her arguments with facts and logic.
Chair Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. You know, I keep hearing you say your job is to carry out the mission of the executive branch and the agenda of the president. It's kind of hard to figure out what the president's foreign policy is. It jumps around from Gaza being a resort area to we're going to help Ukraine or we're not. We're going to have tariffs on China or we're not. We're meddling in the Romanian election. I don't know how you figure out what the agenda is. Also, you say you want to make the State Department stronger, but everything we've seen coming from y'all is that you're dead set on kind of killing it or at least undermining American interests. I think you proposed an 84% budget cut, plans for widespread diplomatic closures, laying off staff across the board. I don't see how any of those things really makes us stronger and delivers for the American people. Now, I believe that jeopardizes our national security, but I want to ask you something a little more arcane, a little more specific to my district that has to do with some economic investments, and that's about tourism. You know, we've been working very hard to improve the visa services over the last few years. Seems to me what you're doing is going to undercut that and move us backwards. We're already seeing this as a problem in Las Vegas where tourists are down by 8% just in a few short months. And this problem's going to become more acute as we look to host the Olympics and we host the World Cup. So could I just ask you, are you planning to cut the Consular Affairs Bureau that does the visas by 15% like we're hearing?
No, consular affairs may actually even be expanded. And in fact, we are looking for ways to do double shifts in some of our embassies around the world because of the visa requirements. For example, if you haven't applied for a visa from Colombia already, you probably won't get here in time for the World Cup unless we go to double shifts. So we've even talked about reassigning foreign service officers, many of who are trained earlier in their career in consular services, to provide 24-hour presence in some of our embassies and consulates around the world just to handle the visa load for things like the World Cup, the FIFA World Cup, the FIFA Club Cup, and then the Olympics 2 years behind it.
How are you going to do that with an 84% budget cut?
There's no 84%, but I think you're referring to USAID when it comes to the State Department.
I know that's part of it, but just
yeah,
generally.
But when it comes to the State Department, our consular services are actually intend on ramping up efforts because of the reasons that I've just outlined below, because of the reasons I just outlined earlier. And we recognize that as a top priority. We want it to be a success. It's a priority for the president. And I think there are good numbers because it's the same division that handles it. We are setting records in the numbers of passports that are being processed. Same group of people, so it shows that our systems are improving. And finally, we're looking of ways to infusing technology and AI to even further and rapidly increase that process even further, particularly for people, people who have had visas in the past, so we're just restoring visas. We can move even much quicker on many of those.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that, but I want to look and see what you do, not just what you say, because when you talk about cutting budgets, talk about cutting personnel, talk about closing embassies and consulates, I don't know how you can increase the visa process or make it quicker.
There's no proposal at this time to close embassies or consulates. That's been media reporting because people like to leak lies, but there's no such
So
work.
that's not happening?
None are proposed, and I think I would
Know
know.
about it? Well, okay, well, let's check that out and see where that information is coming from. If I could switch just a little bit to Afghanistan, you've heard a little bit about that. I introduced legislation to authorize the CARE Act, the Coordination for Afghan Relocation Efforts. You voted for that, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Mass voted for that. We called for this to be created and have an appointment made. I wonder, can you tell us what's happening with that to help us serve these Afghan refugees? Or are you wearing that hat too, or is there somebody else that you're going to appoint to that position?
Primarily the DHS responsibility for the intake of people into our country. I can certainly take that back and give you information on what progress they've made in that regard. But I will also tell you that one of the things we're tackling right now is we have to be able to properly vet anyone who comes into this country, given the mass migration events we've confronted over the last 3 years.
I suspect these people are vetted as much or more than just about anybody else coming into the country as refugees.
Well, some of them, they include dependents, and in many cases, a higher level of vetting is necessary because they're coming from countries where we don't have a lot of information. Not every country keeps, including Afghanistan, has perfect records. Some of them, we know them because they've worked with us in the past. Others, we just have limited information on them.
So, but we are going to continue with this Afghan relocation efforts and this office, this CARE office, that's what you're committing to me?
Well, we're going to comply with the statutory requirements, but we
Okay,
also
well,
have to
that's
be
good.
more careful about who we let into this country.
Well, I didn't say that. I know we have to be careful, but I'm just saying we need to continue with that effort. You voted for it. Mr. Mass voted for it, but I don't see any progress on it. I hear just the opposite. So I appreciate that commitment. Thank you, and I yield back.
Let me start by saying this. Marco Rubio represents exactly what we need in our State Department. A man who understands that America's interests come first, not the interests of other nations, not the interests of global elites, but the interests of the American people. And watching him handle Titus's grandstanding was a masterclass in how to defend America First policies. Titus starts off by attacking President Trump's foreign policy, claiming it's inconsistent and jumps around. This is rich coming from someone whose party gave us the disastrous foreign policy decisions of the previous administration. She mentions Gaza, Ukraine, and China as if having nuanced positions on complex international issues is somehow a bad thing. But here's what she doesn't understand, and what Democrats never seem to grasp. America first doesn't mean America isolated. It means America putting its own interests at the forefront of every decision. When it comes to Gaza, President Trump has been clear that we want peace, but we're not going to throw Israel under the bus like the previous administration was willing to do. On Ukraine, we're not writing blank checks anymore. We're demanding accountability and results. And on China, we're finally treating them like the strategic competitor they are instead of pretending they're our friends while they steal our intellectual property and manipulate their currency. But then, Titus really shows her true colors by attacking what she calls an 84% budget cut to the State Department. This is classic Democrat fear-mongering, taking numbers out of context and presenting them in the most inflammatory way possible. Rubio immediately corrects her, explaining that she's confusing USAID with the State Department budget. This is either dishonest or incompetent on Titus's part, and frankly, I'm not sure which is worse. Let's talk about USAID for a moment, because this is important. USAID has been a money pit for decades, sending billions of American taxpayer dollars overseas with little to show for it. We've been funding projects that don't serve American interests, propping up corrupt governments, and essentially subsidizing anti-American sentiment around the world. If there are significant cuts to USAID, that's not a bug, that's a feature. Every dollar we don't send overseas is a dollar that can be used to fix our own problems here at home. The irony of Titus complaining about diplomatic closures while representing Las Vegas is not lost on me. She's worried about tourism numbers being down 8%, and she's trying to blame that on the Trump administration's policies. But let's be honest about what's really hurting tourism. It's the policies that her own party has been pushing for years. High taxes, overregulation, and a general hostility toward business have made America less competitive as a tourist destination. When Rubio explains that consular services might actually be expanded, and that they're looking at double shifts to handle visa processing for major events like the World Cup and Olympics, you can see Titus struggling to pivot. She came in with her talking points about cuts and closures, and Rubio just demolished them with actual facts about what the administration is planning. This is what competent leadership looks like. Instead of just throwing money at problems like Democrats love to do, the Trump administration is looking at smart solutions. Using technology, artificial intelligence, and better processes to improve efficiency. Reassigning personnel where they're needed most. This is how you run a government like a business instead of like a charity. Rubio's comment about people liking to leak lies is particularly important because it highlights one of the biggest problems we face in getting accurate information to the American people. The media, in partnership with deep state bureaucrats, constantly leaks false information designed to make the Trump administration look bad. They create these narratives about massive cuts and closures that simply aren't true, and then Democrats like Titus repeat them in congressional hearings as if they're established fact. This is why channels like ours are so important. We're not getting our information from anonymous sources with political axes to grind. We're looking at what officials actually say in official settings, under oath, where there are consequences for lying. When Rubio says there are no proposals to close embassies or consulates, that's on the record. When he explains the actual plans for consular services, that's documented testimony. The discussion about Afghanistan is particularly revealing because it shows how Democrats want to have it both ways. Titus supported legislation to help Afghan refugees, which is fine, but then she complains when the administration wants to implement proper vetting procedures. This is the same party that spent years screaming about Russian interference in our elections, but apparently they think we should just open our doors to people from countries where we have limited information and poor record keeping. Rubio's response here is perfect. He acknowledges the statutory requirements while emphasizing the need for proper vetting. This is what responsible governance looks like. We can fulfill our obligations to people who helped us while still protecting American national security. It's not an either-or proposition, despite what Democrats want you to believe. The broader point here is that Titus represents everything wrong with the Washington establishment's approach to foreign policy. She's more concerned with process than results, more worried about what other countries think than what's good for America, and more interested in scoring political points than solving actual problems. Look at her priorities in this hearing. She's worried about tourism numbers in Las Vegas, which is certainly important to her constituents, but she's attacking the very policies that would improve our visa processing and make America more attractive to legitimate visitors. She's concerned about Afghan refugees, which shows compassion, but she's resistant to the security measures that would make such programs politically sustainable. This is the difference between America First conservatives and establishment politicians of both parties. We understand that you can't have effective foreign policy without putting American interests first. You can't have generous immigration and refugee policies without rigorous security screening. You can't have global engagement without fiscal responsibility. Rubio understands these trade-offs because he's lived them. He's seen what happens when America projects weakness, when we lead from behind, when we apologize for our strength instead of using it wisely. The policies he's implementing aren't about isolationism or xenophobia. They're about making sure that American foreign policy serves American interests first and foremost. The visa processing improvements that Rubio describes are a perfect example. Instead of just hiring more people and spending more money, they're using technology and better processes to improve efficiency. They're reassigning personnel based on actual needs rather than bureaucratic inertia. They're planning ahead for major events instead of just reacting to crises. This is what good government looks like, and it's exactly what Trump promised when he ran for president. Running government like a business, focusing on results rather than process, putting America first in every decision. The fact that Titus seems surprised by these common-sense approaches tells you everything you need to know about how broken our foreign policy establishment had become. For decades, we've had a State Department that seemed more concerned with what the international community thought than what was good for American citizens. We've had diplomats who saw their job as apologizing for America rather than advancing American interests. That changes with leaders like Rubio who understand that diplomacy is not about being liked, it's about achieving objectives that benefit the American people. Sometimes that means being tough with allies who aren't pulling their weight. Sometimes it means walking away from bad deals. Sometimes it means saying no to requests that don't serve our interests. The media will never give credit to the Trump administration for these kinds of practical improvements because it doesn't fit their narrative. They want you to believe that America first means America alone, that putting our country first means abandoning our allies and isolating ourselves from the world. But that's not what's happening here. What's happening is that we finally have leaders who understand that effective international engagement requires strength, clarity, and yes, putting American interests first. Other countries respect strength, not weakness. They respond to clarity, not mixed messages. And they're more likely to work with us when they know we're serious about our own priorities. The exchange we just watched is a microcosm of the broader battle for America's future. On one side, you have people like Titus who represent the failed establishment approach that gave us endless wars, bad trade deals, and a foreign policy that served everyone except the American people. On the other side, you have leaders like Rubio who understand that America's strength benefits not just Americans, but the entire world. This is why your support matters so much. The establishment media won't tell you about successes like improved visa processing or more efficient diplomatic operations. They won't explain how America First policies actually make us more effective on the world stage, not less. They certainly won't give credit where credit is due when Trump administration policies deliver real results for real people. That's why we need channels like America First to get the truth out there. We're not funded by corporate sponsors with their own agendas. We're supported by patriots like you who want to see America succeed and who understand that success requires honest reporting about what's actually happening in Washington. If you found this analysis helpful, make sure you hit that like button and share this video with friends and family who need to hear the truth. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/AmericaFirst. For just $5 a month, you can help us continue bringing you the real story behind the headlines. The fight for America's future is happening right now, in congressional hearings like this one, in policy decisions being made every day, and in the court of public opinion where narratives are shaped and opinions are formed. We can't afford to let the establishment media control that narrative. We need to get the truth out there, and that's exactly what we're going to keep doing here at America First. Thanks for watching, Patriots. Keep fighting the good fight, and remember, America First isn't just a slogan, it's a way of governing that puts the American people where they belong, at the center of every decision our government makes. We'll see you in the next video.